Hello, everyone. That works. Welcome. My name is Marie-Aude Ziade. I'm a partner at the international law firm Gowling WLG. I am based in Paris, France, and I lead our dispute resolution practice in France. Before that, I spent 7 years of my career in-house, including at Areva, which is now called Orano, which, as you know, is one of the world's leader in the nuclear sector. I was their head of disputes, hence supervising all of the major disputes of the group, litigations, arbitrations, pre-litigation, things that you do not want to talk about. That was my job. I have the pleasure to be here with André Liebenberg from Yellowcake, Marie-Aude, Managing Director and CEO of Elevate Uranium, and Chris Opperman, operating partner for Africa and the Middle East at C5 Capital. What we're going to discuss today is how nuclear energy, hence uranium mining's role, will be essential in the coming years, especially in Africa. As you know, Africa is the least electrified continent in the world, with only 58% of the population having access to electricity. The continent is heavily dependent on fossil fuels, with 74% of its energy mix, which is fossil. And we also know that the population is expected to double by 2050. This means that Africa is in great need of energy. And we on this panel are convinced that nuclear energy could help reduce significantly this electricity deficit. So, first question for you, Chris. Could you maybe tell us why we are convinced that nuclear energy is a future for Africa?
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. So C5 Capital is a VC company, and we're investing in space, nuclear, and also in cybersecurity. And we are now looking at projects in Africa, and we believe that there's various reasons why Africa is the right place. As you say, it's a young continent. 1 in 4 people are going to be African by 2050 worldwide. 600 million Africans are totally without power. And we believe that there's going to be a massive increase in power demand. Also, apart from the growth in human population, there's also going to be, just by 2033, a 35% increase in demand for other uses, including AI. And so I think it's self-evident that where 77% of Africa's current energy is generated by fossil fuels, that especially with AI coming and data centers coming, that the need for clean energy is self-evident. So the demand is there, and we believe that uranium, which is in abundant supply in Africa, can be the entry point for Africa from a strategic perspective, and investments are already flowing into uranium. The demand for uranium is going to grow. From uranium, the investments into small modular reactors. We believe that small modular reactors provide an ideal opportunity for the private sector to get involved because of the relative size of the investments that makes it possible for private sector investment.
Thank you, Chris. And then what are the short-term prospects for nuclear power growth in Africa? André, would you like to tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, you know... Am I? Yeah. Chris mentioned the small modular reactors. And, you know, this has been a technology that's been spoken about for a while. You know, we've got the micro reactors on submarines and aircraft carriers. But I think the big shift for me was last year when the hyperscalers, you know, the Microsofts, the Metas, the Amazon Web Services companies started looking at data center growth and then how to power that through small modular reactors. And I think what's happened with those guys getting involved with the size of their balance sheets, it's going to push this technology forward much faster than it would have happened if it stayed with the traditional energy companies, like your Dukes, your Constellations, your EDFs. So I think that is going to be a big kicker for nuclear. And it's perfectly suited to Africa because, big reactors in relatively small economies don't make sense. And if you have a big reactor in a vast space, you have to string up connectivity, which is expensive. So I think these small modular reactors are perfectly suited to Africa because of their scale, both in terms of physical scale, but also in terms of economic scale. The capex is going to be much, much smaller. And we're seeing a number of African countries now looking at small modular to facilitate the growth of their energy sector.
South Africa has its own nuclear program, right, already?
Yeah, South Africa's got the 2 plants just here in Cape Town, Koeberg 1 and 2, which have recently had refurbishments and life extensions. But again, South Africa has got a reasonable demand, but I don't think South Africa will build another big reactor. And again, I think small modular is perfectly suited. Koeberg here works for South Africa because you've got most of your generation up in the Highveld, but you've got load there and around the country. So it sort of balances the grid. But again, small modular, if you can co-locate it with where your demand is, you cut down on the interconnectivity requirements.
And in this respect, how do African uranium producers compare, like on a cost basis, to the rest of the world? Marie, would you like to say a word of that?
I'll just add to the initial few questions.
Of course.
If you say that, Africa being a third world country or a third world continent lags the first world, then there's clearly going to be a need for more energy. You see, even in Namibia, when we go there, you see remote areas, people that don't really have much of a home have a mobile phone. They need to charge it. And they're having, satellite TV on their little tin shacks. So the demand for electricity is increasing. And as you say, you throw in data centres on top of that. And surely the first world aren't going to let Africa store their data off the continent. So there's going to be a need for nuclear in that respect. And as you say, you need reliable baseload energy. I know that I'm probably sitting in a glass house living in Australia, throwing stones out because our government thinks the sun shines 24 hours a day and solar panels are going to be the answer to our energy crisis. But, we do need reliable baseload energy. And they've got it here could have it here in terms of nuclear. But as you say, SMRs are probably the answer here because they're a lot simpler. They're not huge construction and not large size. But yeah, so then moving along to what fuels nuclear, uranium. I quite often get asked, we've got projects in Namibia and Australia. We get asked comparison between Athabasca Basin. Now, Athabasca Basin has percentages of grades. Namibia has hundreds of ppms. So on a grade basis, people say that grade is king. But, you look back at the history of mining uranium in Namibia, Rosting have been operating since 1976 on a continuous basis. So there's 48 plus years of continuous operating. So they're running at somewhere in the order of 320 ppm feed. And when you consider Cigar Lake or 8% or whatever, it's an enormous difference. But they're now down 450 metres in their pit. So they've proven that low grades work in Namibia. Now, so when you're looking at a comparison between the two, you can produce uranium from Namibia from ppms of 300 ppm as cheap as you can produce it in Athabasca Basin in Canada for 8%. So very different mining methods, a lot deeper there, a lot shallower. I mean, our resource at Copies is 50% within 7 metres of surface. So that's a very simple mining method. We don't have to drill 500 metres to find something. So I think people tend to talk about grade is king, but it is, but it's not the only factor that influences the cost. And I think that we've got a proven record in Namibia of low grades, and I think that will continue.
But still Africa's facing challenges in advancing its nuclear energy sector. Could you maybe, André, tell us what those challenges are mainly?
Yeah, I think, it's access to capital. The capital requirements of the energy sector are significant. And then, back to the earlier comment about the interconnectivity. So, it's how do you finance these very big capital-intensive projects? And I think that's going to be the challenge. I think on the small modular reactor side, one of the challenges currently is the regulations around it. We've got very established regulations around big reactors, but small modular reactors have their own requirements on the regulatory side. So that's unfolding. We're seeing that happen in the US and Canada and other places. But I think that's going to be a requirement as well.
And what about the public perception? What is it? Are usually people in favor of nuclear energy, or?
Yeah, talking from Yellow Cake, we IPO'd in 2018, and walking around London and New York and Canada, talking about nuclear and uranium, it was like, wow, it was a bit bespoke, to say the least. But what's happened over the last while, and we can see it in terms of our share register and the engagement I have, my starting engagement with specialist resource funds. Then it moved on to generalists. Then I was getting calls from the media, talking to the FT and the economists. And it's, you look at the press today, you can pick up a newspaper or a report, and you'll see talk of nuclear almost every day. Back in 2018, which was only 6 years ago, you never saw anything on nuclear. So to me, that's the evidence of the perception change. But then you look at all the surveys they have around the world, and pretty much everywhere other than Germany, we've seen a swing in terms of the pro-nuclear. I think the Russian invasion in Ukraine was a big push for nuclear and energy security. People started understanding what the needs for energy security. You look at a country like Japan, where they import all their energy. When the coal price went through the roof with the invasion and the LNG price, they were paying through their nose for energy, and they had all these reactors. Now they've restarted 14 of them already. So I think there's generally an increasing supportive perception around the world, and I think it's been backed by supportive government policies. We've seen in the previous regime in the US under Biden, a very, very supportive pro-nuclear policy, and we're seeing that, again, around the world.
And maybe I can just add to that. You say that it's the Biden administration, but the US passed the Advance Act, which was a bipartisan law that was passed both by the Republicans and the Democrats. And the Advance Act is focusing also on regulatory cooperation between the United States and African countries, or countries around the world, but specifically Africa. So I think a big part of the shift in sentiment is also in the cooperation between countries that is going to lead to regulatory streamlining, and also going to lead to surety on the part of investors of the regulatory environment. The technology is there. It's basically the regulatory environment that is in the process of being reformulated, and I think that is where it's at.
You talk about public perception. There's two public perceptions. As you alluded to, there's the media perception, and then there's a real public perception. So being here last year, 12 months ago, I was in Pau. We were playing golf, admittedly, and 41 degrees, 42 degrees, load shedding. So from midday to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you had no power. Didn't have any air conditioning, and houses aren't designed for no air conditioners. So if you said to a South African, we're going to solve your load shedding problems, you're not going to be load shedding, and it's going to be nuclear, I think you'd have 100% support. Because much like Namibia, and I talk to those countries because I'm familiar with them, if you've got power versus no power, or electricity, you're always going to vote for electricity. So the public perception, as the media want us to know, is probably a little bit different sometimes to what the public perception really is on the people on the ground that are experiencing it. I'm going to tell you what, at 41, 42 degrees in a house not designed for heat without air conditioner, it's not comfortable. So, and they have it all the time. Now, fortunately, in Namibia, we get a lot of power from South Africa, but the agreement is that they don't cut the power. And if they do, it affects the supply lines and costs them a lot of money to repair. So even though in South Africa's load shedding, when you get into Namibia, you're not.
Yeah.
And then the public perception too is if you live near a government official, you don't get load shed. If you live near a water pumping station, you don't get load shed. So it's selective load shedding as well. And I think if they got rid of that, they'd be very, very supportive.
I fully agree. But I mean, you're talking to a French woman. We've been supporting nuclear energy for years. But I'm glad to see that things are shifting. It's a new paradigm. Like part of these challenges to me, probably because I'm a lawyer, is also to take some of the risks into consideration. I mean, we're talking even for SMRs, although my experience is more with large-scale EPRs, but we're talking about major projects, which in average take 8 years to be completed, with thousands of personnel involved, tens of thousands of documents. So I just wanted to share maybe with you today a couple of advice, because my experience has shown that the sooner you take these risks into consideration, the better, because at the end of the day, believe me, it saves a lot of costs to your company. So maybe 2 things very quickly. Of course, you need to have a robust, but that's obvious, project claim management procedure. But I really recommend strongly that you are careful about your dispute resolution clause. Everything is there. You have to have something which is appropriate for those projects. I mean, those are the most complex design in the world. You don't want to go to the national courts, first of all, because obviously you are most of the time in front of government entities which are controlling the licenses and the permits, so you would rather not go to their national courts. Second of all, because having an arbitration panel is having the certainty to have experts which know what they are dealing with in terms of this industry, which again is really complex. And you also have confidentiality, very important, when the contractors and the suppliers and everybody in the chain is upon great scrutiny from public opinion. So that's my recommendation. Do choose arbitration. I know you will say this is expensive, but it's less expensive than court litigation, which is way longer, plus could be corrupted in some countries. And last thing, I wanted to encourage you to think about a first stage of resolution of disputes with what it's called a dispute board. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's a panel of third-party neutrals, and they are also experts. You appoint them with the other parties involved, and they can, purge whatever claims are happening, and they do it quickly. So it's better than having an accumulation of claims and frustrations. I was in charge of the TVO arbitration you might have heard of in Finland. It was a nightmare for Arriva. It costed us a lot. So it's a good, return and Rex on what should probably be done and could be done in a better way. So that was just my couple advice.
Are you suggesting that there's going to be dispute resolution leading to the nuclear plant being built, or is it post? It's all pre.
Both. I mean, I've never seen any nuclear plant which goes like perfectly well. There's always overruns. There's always delays. So the construction phase is almost inevitably facing claims. I'm not saying this goes up until the dispute formally, but those exist. And those dispute boards, I think, it's really a good way to avoid and purge the little ones, because then they are standing, they are just paid a retainer fee, which is not a lot compared to the billions that we're talking. And they know the project, they go on the site, they can then deal with the claims very rapidly. This is really something I would recommend for any construction of any power plant.
But this problem is not isolated to nuclear. This problem is not. It's the.
No,
I mean, every project now, in Australia, is cost overruns, and time overruns by substantial amounts.
No, that's true. I mean, it's also, it would fit another kind of industry. But what I could see, being in charge of those litigations in the nuclear industry, is that this one is so regulated. It's so complex. You have so much layers of, safety, environmental design, etc. That it's probably the most complex of it all. And having those experts, neutrals, looking at this objectively and trying to find who between the owner and the contractor and the regulator is right, it reduces the frustrations.
Yeah, from an audience perspective, it's good to know that it's regulated very well. So we're not saying it's overly regulated and is onerous. It's regulated for a reason, to make it safe. But yeah, I think it's also worth noting that it's not just isolated to the nuclear industry that cost overruns. So don't walk away out of here going, well, nuclear's got real problems we need to sort out, and it's got real cost overruns. No, that's just how we are at the moment.
No, it's true.
The whole world in every construction project. Look, so the UAE, I think you blokes might know more than me, but the UAE, I think they're on time, on budget.
Yep.
Some of the latest reactors. So it's not just the French that build them slowly. It's know
what you mean.
I thought I'd get a reaction from Christian. It's it's every project in the world, but there's some projects that do run on time, and some nuclear reactors have absolutely run on time. And we don't have many accidents around the world related to nuclear.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really in terms of accidents. I agree with you. It's more the construction phase, and then the decommissioning phase. We've got lots of those disputes as well, because this is also complex to dismantle. I mean, this whole cycle is complex from the extraction up until the end. So I've just seen so many of them that I'm just encouraging everyone to think in advance of how to manage them and include appropriate dispute resolution processes from the outset instead of just facing the issue, which is what happened with TVO, basically. I mean, we were not ready, and it ended up in 9 years of arbitration. This was a disaster. So I would not, of course, recommend that any of you face the same. That's... last question, because of course, there's challenges and there is those risks which are inherent to any large-scale project, but still, why would you think that it's still interesting and worth investing in the uranium today, in Africa in particular? André?
Yeah, I think for me, the nuclear story or the uranium story in the next 3 to 5 years is all about supply. We talk all about the demand, SMRs, China's building reactors like there's no tomorrow, across other Asian countries. But it's the supply side that's really, really challenged at the moment. The current supply environment is running at full stretch. And if you look ahead, how long it takes to permit a project and bring a project on stream, where the prices are now, if you go back 3 or 4 years, people say, well, that's incentive pricing, and yet you don't see the supply coming. People forget it just takes a long time, and it's hard work to bring supply to the market. So for me, I think we're in a situation where we've got a very fragile supply side against a very exciting demand outlook.
Absolutely, totally agree with that. And, we're not supplying enough uranium for our current fleet, but then when you add, on top of that, you add the AI data centres, and you add the increased growth, the SMRs. So you look back at the comparisons between, say, lithium. Lithium was built on future demand, the market, and the bubble burst. Nuclear is built on current demand, as you point out. And then there's the future demand, which is enormous. So you can't see the bubble bursting for uranium like it has. And as you say, it takes a long time to get projects into production. And that's not just isolated to uranium. That's, any metal around the world. For some reason, the world are resisting mining, but they desperately need it, and they need more of it. So and the African continent has a good history. I shouldn't say the African continent, because Niger has not got a good history. As you would know, the French people in the room know it's not very nice, but sort of the better countries like Namibia, where we are very good to deal with. They have a very strong history of uranium mining, and Rossing being there for 48 years is a good example of that. So there's the familiarisation with it, and hence the approvals process meets less resistance in Namibia than it would in Australia, because there's less wokeism. There's more people used to uranium and what it can do for them, and they understand the future. So if you know that you're going to have power when you flick the switch on, the dispute resolutions aren't going to be too many because that's what they need.
Yeah. Chris, do you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that the sentiment shift, the fact that data centers and the industrialization of data is going to come to Africa. The fact that in South Africa, we've already run efficiently and cleanly a Koeberg power station. We've got an established regulatory framework. I think all of those factors, the fact that the Minister of Energy has now said that nuclear energy and specifically small modular reactors is the future for South Africa, all of that sentiment shift, I think, is important. The importance of the private sector funding model, I think, is what's going to drive the change in Africa. I think there are challenges that we've got to look at, but what I see as very important is the fact that private financing is already investing in uranium, and I think the start is with uranium because of the obvious need on the supply side, as you are saying. And I think that the private sector and there's a few examples in Africa of private sector investments that are now spearheading the reestablishment of Africa as an important uranium supply continent. That is going to lead into more investor confidence that's going to move into investments in small modular reactors. And that's what we are putting together. We are putting a private sector model together for Africa, and we are very confident that that's going to be successful.
Thank you. Do we have questions from the audience? Yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I just had one question, maybe for Mr. Hill. You talked about current demand versus future demand, and what do you see the demand outlook being like over the next 5 years, and what do you see the supply coming on stream over that period?
So the current demand is something like £200 million per annum to feed the current nuclear fleet, and I think we're producing at about £150 million per annum. So we're 25% short. So then you look at, so that's going to drive the market. So then you look at who's going to come on stream to feed the rest. You've seen a few, Boss Energy come on, Langer Heinrich come on stream. Some of our peers in Namibia have been talking about coming on stream for a while and still haven't made a decision. And they're probably still 4 years away. So when you then consider that by 2030, the US is expected to have 12% of their energy consumed by data centres, that's a big increase. So where's that going to come from? So yes, you're not going to build a nuclear power plant between now and then. You're probably not going to build solar between now and then. It's not going to do enough for you anyway. You're not going to do wind. Where's it going to come from? So I can't see that the coal fleet's going to be shut down as quick as is predicted. The net zero targets are never going to be achieved, not in my lifetime. We need, because you can't have data going offshore. Like from Australia, we need data security. So if these data centres need to operate on a continuous basis, where they get their energy from. So if we do shut down coal, we've got no data security in Australia. That's a disaster for the country. So I can see that immediately there's the immediate need for uranium. There's not going to feed the market. I mean, we're 5 years away ourselves, minimum. Where's it going to come from? I can't see it coming quickly. So hence, I can see the uranium price going through $150 a pound comfortably and heading further north than that. And Yellow Cake probably want to see it go through 200, and I reckon it will. So that's one thing driving it, and then the future demand. And I don't think we've actually understand how much data centres require energy-wise. I don't think it's understood properly for us to be educated on it. But the estimate of 12% for the US 2 years ago, I've heard it was like 6%. So in 2 years' time, is it going to be 24%? So how much more energy do you need for data centres, and how quickly are they going to be developed? I think they're developed a lot faster than we can produce any energy. You blokes might want to comment on that.
And I think, Murray, that's the point I tried to make earlier about the game changer in terms of the Microsofts and these guys. I mean, Larry Ellison said the entry ticket to a data center is $100 billion, and you have to have the energy for it. So, I do think that these hyperscale companies are going to just push this technology a lot faster than it would have happened had it stayed in the traditional industry. You talk about the stats. I think the NVIDIA chip, where they went for the H100 chip to the B200 chip at 700 watts to 1.2 kilowatts, and they're going to ship 1 million units in like 4 months. That's one big power station of demand in 4 months. I mean, it's absolutely staggering.
And they've got a history of doing things themselves. Look at Amazon. Amazon went to the airline and said, we want to shift this much around the world, cargo. They said, no, we're not going to do it. So they built their own airline. Now they're the second largest airline in the world? So they're not going to wait for utilities to move. They're going to move, as we're seeing now. They're going to move, and they're going to move quickly. So they're going to drive the market more than anything.
We've already seen that. I don't know if you're aware of Amazon's investment of $500 million now in X-Energy in the United States. That is one of the indicators of the hyperscalers climbing in. So there are some predictions, and who knows, but they're talking of $13.4 billion just on small modular reactor investments by 2034.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So based on that, three different numbers from each of you, what is a realistic long-term price for uranium?
I think,
three different numbers.
I've been in the mining industry for a long time. Inducement pricing matters. Supply always comes eventually. I think in this industry, supply is going to take a while to come. So you're going to have price disruptions, price fly-ups in the short to medium term. In the long term, these projects will come on stream, they will produce, and you'll maybe get back to what is incentive pricing, $100. You'll get back to stable long-term prices. But for me, this is a 3 to 5 years time frame where you could have a massive price fly-up. If you have, one of the large mines has an event, a weather event, and it always happens in the mining industry, who knows what the price could be?
Price, I said in my presentation yesterday morning, will be north of 150, and I think it'll go through 200. But as you say, there'll be spikes driven by, as you point out, demand. I think we're going to sit at 150 plus because we need incentive. And you were seeing some of the companies that come out 3-4 years ago and said we need $65 a pound. We went through 80 and they never moved. So they're still not moving. So I think there's a few little porcupines being told about how much the incentive price needs to be. So I think it's north of what anybody says, it's north of that. So, and as you say, you need incentive. We don't have incentive now at, what are we sitting at, $80 a pound or whatever. So I think 150 is sustainable and beyond.
Is there other questions? Sorry, Chris, I forgot you.
The price of uranium?
Sorry.
No, I'm not going to venture to give you an answer.
Questions? Don't be shy. Nope. Anything else that you would like to discuss, add? We have 10 minutes left. No? Marie?
I think your sort of dispute resolution aspect, I think, is something that I don't think is going to happen too much because the demand for energy from the end user is going to drive them more than anything else. So I look at the African continent, I see, you drive to the airport and you'll see these tin shacks that are 2 metres by 3 metres and you'll see a DSTV satellite dish on top of it. What do they want? Do they want a house? Do they want electricity? They want electricity more than they want anything. So they're going to drive it. They're not going to dispute if they've got electricity 24/7. Going to Australia, we're learning that renewables don't cut the mustard and we need reliable baseload energy, and nuclear is it. And we want to go to this net zero, which is impossible to achieve, by the way, but it's a target that they've put out there. And you can't do it with coal. You can't do it with renewables. Because, like, I was sitting outside last night at a restaurant. The sun wasn't shining, solar wasn't working, the wind wasn't blowing, so I've put my wind system in. Now I've duplicated my energy system and I've still got no power. Well, what am I going to do? I have to go for coal? Do I have to go for gas? So we're slowly learning in Australia that it's a problem. You can't go for renewables. They don't cut the mustard. Germany have learned, California have learned, but not very well. They still haven't done enough about it. So we do need reliable baseload energy. Nuclear is it. It's just going to take a while to get there. But if we were moving down another path, we're still going to take a long time to get there. Yeah. So for Australia, if we went going down the renewables path as the current government are, they need 27,000 kilometres of transmission lines. That doesn't happen overnight. That doesn't happen in 5 years, especially the way we work in Australia. It's simply slower than everybody else because of our union impact. So to me, nuclear is the answer, but not the whole answer. But it's going to take time to get there. And while we're getting there, we're going to have this huge demand for uranium, and us sort of explorers, would-be developers, producers, are going to benefit from that. But then once we've got that system in place, I think there's going to be a sustainable level of uranium price that drives it.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all for being so attentive and for your questions. Thank you.